alcohol counts. On any given day, right? I love it. In moderation. We'll get to that in my story. But, well, that's good to see, because a lot of the times the audience is, every hand goes down that they don't have effective strategies. But how many of you would like to walk out of here this evening with some effective strategies to help you lower stress when you're feeling it? Awesome. Glad to see it. Well, as you heard, my name is Sam. I'm a 9/11 first responder and former U.S. Secret Service agent. And I was front and center on September 11th. And through the years, I've been coined many different names. Courage Consultant is one of them, because I was able to navigate my way back through post-traumatic stress. And I'm so privileged to be able to travel around now and share my story with you all tonight. And so, without further ado, September 11th started off as just another normal Tuesday. And I soon found myself stuck in an accident on a bridge that I would take to my office every day. And I looked down at the clock in my G-Ride. We call that, our G-Rides are government vehicles. And on that clock, it just went tick, 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 and I thought, oh shoot, I'm gonna be on time, which meant I was gonna be late, right, law enforcement? Exactly. So I let my supervisor know what was going on, and basically what that set in motion was a timeline that would forever change my life. I made it to my building, I made it to Tower 1, which is where we parked, and I got onto the elevator, and we started our ascent up to the plaza level. Now, every day after I would get to the plaza level, I would walk across to World Trade Center, Tower 7, which is where my offices were. The U.S. Secret Service had our New York field offices located in that building. Well, while we were starting our ascent, all of a sudden, the lights started flickering and the elevator car started shaking. And I thought, oh great, now I'm getting stuck in an elevator. What I didn't know was some 94 stories above, American Airlines Flight 11 had just struck the World Trade Center. Now, all of a sudden, it was as if a hand grabbed the top of our elevator car and started yanking us up to the top. And we stopped so abruptly that the tension of the wires, it literally was bouncing us up and down. The doors flew open, and we were met with the hottest ball of dust. It literally blew us backwards when we went to step out. There was already a debris field at the ground level. Now, in training, we were used to training amongst chaos, things blowing up. The instructors love to do that, and it trained me for this kind of chaos, for this day. Because there was no panic. Very calmly, and my brain said, there's been an explosion, get out. I grabbed as many people as I could. We went up an escalator and out an exit door that I had never used before, because my gut said go that way. And law enforcement, you listen to your gut, you're going to go home that night. And immediately my senses were bombarded by what was taking place in front of me. I watched as pieces of metal, pieces of concrete, and pieces of people rain down around us. And I had a woman with me this whole time, and I had one mission. At that point, I was like, we're getting to my building. And so we skirted around the building that we exited, and I came to a corner where I could see into my building, 7. And as I concentrated on it, I could see my supervisor and some of my squad mates in the lobby level. And my supervisor was saying, come on, Sam, run. Now, at this point, I felt pretty secure because I was shielded from everything coming down around me, so I didn't really want to step out from where I was. But I knew she had my six. She had my back. She would never purposefully draw me into a more dangerous situation. So I turned to the woman who was with me. I said, come on, we're going over there. We took off running. And immediately when we hit that pedestrian bridge, she broke our embrace, went down a set of steps. I have no idea what happened to her even to this day. I made it into my building, and we were all congregated around trying to figure out what was going on. We all figured a couple hours would pass and we'd all be at our desks, investigating what this explosion was. Tower 2 gets hit. And we watch the glass in front of our building bow completely inward and pop back out. Now, we didn't have to say a word. We're looking at each other thinking the same thing. We are the third tallest building in the World Trade Center complex, and we are next. See, in addition to the U.S. Secret Service New York field office being in 7, we had then Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management in 7, and other unnamed agencies that the public didn't know about. And so it made sense that this was a coordinated bombing attack. So we evacuated our building and we made it to West Side Highway, where we got our first glimpse into what had occurred. In front of us stood Tower 1 with a huge gaping hole in the top of it. Behind that, Tower 2, we could see the thick black smoke trail, again, thinking explosions. We had no idea that 747s had struck both towers until an agent who was driving his G-Ride down towards us slammed on his brakes, rolled down his window, and said, "Did you guys see the planes?" And we're still like, what planes? We're thinking, okay, we've got the Twin Towers here. What kind of plane could miss this, right? The Pentagon gets hit. He has his radio on. We're at war, is what went through my head. Now, at this point, we're very frustrated because if you're at war, there's usually an identifiable enemy, right? Here we are, armed to the hilt, skills out the wazoo. There's nobody to shoot at. And so we stand there just feeling helpless, thinking, now what do we do? Well, we're trying to make out the scene that's unfolding in front of us, and the brain works in funny ways, and we're like, well, maybe, at the top of the building, maybe that's a wing. We're trying to make the shapes, make something make sense. And then we see our first person. And then we see the second person. And now what we're watching are people jumping to their death. And you could feel them when they hit the ground. And after 10, I stopped counting. Because as a human being, if we need to leave a building, what do? We go to the elevator and we push down. Right? So this was something that was very difficult to understand what I was seeing in front of me. And we were about 2 blocks away from what would be termed ground zero. And that whole morning we're hearing different sounds, smelling different smells. There's one sound in particular. It was a low, grumbling, growling sound. And it just got louder and louder and louder. Tower 2 comes down. And we run into the closest building to us, which happens to be a school. Now, as you can imagine, the principal and all the front desk file out. They're like, who are these people? Well, all armed. And we explain what's going on, what had just occurred. And some of the agents, were all like, well, we have to go back out. We have to start pulling people from the collapsed building. There was only one problem, that dust. You could not be outside without having your mouth and nose covered. So the guys did what they had. We worked together and they started taking off their dress shirts and ripping them up into bandanas that we could tie over our mouth and nose. And myself and 2 other agents decided to stay behind. We were going to set up triage at the school because if the victims are going to come, they need some place to kind of get cleaned up and stabilized so that the ambulances could take them to the hospital. After about 30 minutes, we're wondering where everybody is. Nobody's coming. The principal comes running, tells us he's been given orders to evacuate. So we said, no problem, we'll help you with that. What we didn't know was that the school was made up of physically and mentally challenged kids. So now we have walkers, wheelchairs, scooters, you name it, involved in the evacuation. We got everybody out, myself, the 2 agents that I was with, the principal, and the student who's about 6 feet tall and his aide. We were the last ones out of that school. And as we're trying to make our way back to West Side Highway to walk north, this student is visibly shaken. He has no idea who I am, the agents are, and what is going on. He's scared because we're taking him out of probably the second safest place for him, his home being the first. And eventually he has had enough and he stops walking. We're doing everything in our power to coax him along, and we start hearing that low grumbling, growling sound again. Tower 1 comes down. And we scoop this young man up and we start running up West Side Highway as fast as we can. It was like every muscle in my body was on fire. But we had to do one thing: beat that dust cloud coming up West Side Highway for us. And we did just that. We were lucky. We stopped and turned around, and out of this dust cloud, their people just appeared, completely covered. Some of them have blood coming from different areas of their bodies, and this was the image that made it into People magazine of us carrying this young man. When we turned to keep walking up West Side Highway, an ambulance seemed to appear out of nowhere, and these firefighter paramedics jumped out, saw us that we were carrying somebody, and helped us. So there we are, standing on West Side Highway, thinking, now what? Now what do we do? Our pagers go off. Everybody remember pagers? Scrolling text. All NYFO, New York Field Office agents report to Pier 63. Now, we had already walked further than you would walk in New York on any given day, but it was just a few blocks further. And when we got there, we realized that our supervisors arranged with the U.S. Park Police to ferry us across the Hudson River to New Jersey, where the New Jersey Field Office agents were waiting to take us home. So went out to the dock, donned my life jacket, got onto the boat, started leaving port, and what lay in front of me is a skyline that is forever changed. And my mind started replaying the events of that morning, being in the elevator and watching the towers burn, and it changed me. And watching the people jump, and eventually the towers fall, and it changed me. And it began a journey that evening called post-traumatic stress. Now, PTSD were the 4 letters that were plopped up on a screen in training, kind of glossed over, and didn't really get into the nitty-gritty. Basically, you never think it's going to happen to you. Well, that night started a cascade of symptoms, starting immediately when I got back to my apartment. I found that I couldn't be in a closed-in space. So even using my bathroom was difficult, which sounds utterly ridiculous for a Secret Service agent, not being comfortable in her own bathroom. And then came the nightmares, and as the days followed, the hypervigilance. What that means is you don't even check your mail without having your gun on you. And anxiety, depression, what it led to eventually was an addiction to alcohol. And I was trying to navigate every day, every week, and every month of my new life dealing with post-traumatic stress, because nothing made sense. I worked so hard for this day. When I became an agent, I got my credentials, and it seemed like it had been erased in a nanosecond. And I remember sitting at my desk reading the same paragraph of a report that I had to submit for the umpteenth time, thinking, this is the definition of insanity. And I wasn't 100%, and any agent that's not at 100%, then somebody might not go home that night. So I made the very difficult decision to resign my position as an agent and return home, which was Maryland at the time, to finally live with my husband. We'll finally be under one roof. And that's the life of an agent, you know? And I thought, great, I'm out of the city. I don't have to drive past the freezer trucks every day, which had nothing to do with ice cream. I didn't have to smell the burning concrete either. And, the trick of post-traumatic stress is, Sam, it lives in your head, duh. But when you're going through it, that's the kind of stuff you don't think about. You just think, how do I stop this? And things got progressively worse. And found myself literally in a cage. My prison was my home. I could not even be outside because God forbid there was a thunderstorm, you'd find me under furniture. So I didn't want to risk anybody seeing me like this, even my own family. So as I kept myself in that prison, I just self-isolated even more and more, didn't talk to anybody on the phone, didn't make contact from anybody in New York, nothing. Until one day I woke up and literally did not recognize my own reflection looking back at me in the mirror. That was it. I had had enough. I had crossed over into something that I was so unfamiliar with. I was ready to check out. I figured nobody needed me like this because I didn't need myself. So it happened to be the new year, and we said goodbye to some friends that came over. I went upstairs to get some sleep. As per usual, sleep eluded me. Went down to the kitchen, grabbed the remaining bottles of alcohol from that evening, went down into my basement, grabbed my gun, sat on the floor, took a deep breath, put my gun to my head, and started squeezing the trigger. And a voice said, "Sam, it's not your time." And I opened my eyes and looked around. I knew I was by myself. I also knew where that voice came from. But I was in such a deep, dark place that I did not want to believe. Drank some more, took a deep breath, put my gun to my head, started squeezing the trigger, and my 10-pound miniature Schnauzer Solomon jumps into my lap. He startles me. I look down into the cutest little fuzzy face, these huge brown eyes looking right back at me, as if they're saying, "I need you. I need you." Pass out, come to a few hours later, Solomon is curled up right by my side. I get up, put my gun away, go into the bathroom, splash some water on my face, kind of bring myself out of it, and I'm staring at my reflection going, okay, if it's not my time, what does that mean, and where do I go from here? I didn't have any clear answers. I know I've been spoken to twice, and I played a very dangerous game. Check out, stay present. And that went on for almost a year. So I'd forgotten a very important lesson that I was taught when I was little. When things are at their worst, when you are literally down on your knees, that is when victory is around the corner. Now, nobody can give you a timeline, and one day, out of the blue, my mom shows up at my house and puts a gift in my hand. A piece of paper with a name and a number. She says, "We need you back." I called the number on that piece of paper, and I got the help of a very, very skilled therapist who was very familiar in treating trauma. And I did make it back. And part of that was the ability to write my book. And from that, even more importantly, were 6 lessons that I learned along the way. And I just want to go over a few with you all tonight. And these are the keys that when you are feeling really stressed out, these are what I want you to remember, to put into practice. Think of them as adding to your toolbox, if you will. The first one is belief. So I had to believe that voice that said, "Sam, it's not your time," because I couldn't afford to believe the one that had me pulling the trigger. Because belief can either bury you or it'll help you soar. If you believe in the naysayers, that negative talk going inside your head, people that says, "Who are you? You can't do that," it'll bury you. But if you believe in your truth, what's here? Everybody knows what that feels like. It is truly a feeling. That is your truth. You stay with that, and you will soar every single time. Fear. 2 choices when dealing with fear. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And when we face everything and rise, that's where courage comes from. And courage looks different depending on the situation. It is not always running into a burning building while others are running out. I love this definition of courage. What about this little guy? Hope he's got his little penguin running shoes on. And I'd say that's pretty courageous. I want you to take just a minute and think about the toughest times that you've had in your life. It could be, a couple of different times throughout. And I want you to think about, I'm going to ask you, how do you think you fought your fear and found your courage? It's such a simple thing, yet we make it so difficult. I mean, I struggled with this for so long. We always act and we persevere, right? Just like when I was an agent in training, I had to pour all my blood, sweat, and tears into getting well, into my therapy, into understanding what stress was and what stress continues to be for me. No matter what, when the things get tough and seem out of control, you always act and you believe things are going to get better. You persevere. So I want you to think about that tough situation that I just asked you to recall. What were the specific things that you did to beat it, to get yourself back? Whatever they were, you acted and you persevered. You refused to let your circumstances define you to beat you. So let's face it, we have all been through some stuff in our lives, every single one of us. And my mission here tonight was to give you some tools so that when you're ready to sit down and think about, dang, not again, you remember just the few things that we talked about here tonight. Now, they're all in the book, which I have over there at the table if you'd like. Because I want you to leave here tonight with a new mission. A mission to be less stressed out. To find the true meaning of your life and ultimately to live with joy. And these are just a few of the things that make me happy. This is my picture of joy. So with that, I want to ask you, did you find just a few lessons that I went over not applicable to that stressful situation that I asked you to recall in your head? Yeah. Can you see that just by applying those three that we went over, that there isn't anything that can really stop you? Yeah, good. This is how you contact me. I am available. I even have my cell phone, my direct cell. I'm going to point out my website. SamanthaHorowitz.com. I put some cool tools on there for you all. So when you visit, you just scroll down the page. I have a free chapter of my book in audio for you, as well as a video which expands on one of the lessons that are in that book.